Hi, I'm Angified. I started Angified Presents.
We share the love of music.
It has been medicine and therapy. Nothing else worked.
It has saved many of us. With mental health, we need to open our eyes.
Hurt people hurt people.
We ask that you listen, comprehend, and relate with your ears.
Form that heart of unity and one.
We share on this stage.
Statistics, feelings.
And ourselves.
We stand with the belief to be you, to be heard, and to be original.
We all may be different, with opinions and beliefs.
At the end of the day, we are all brothers and sisters.
We are family.
We ask that you join us in a magical journey with artists from around the world. Open your minds. Let in the love.
And listen with your hearts.
We all want a better tomorrow. Be one.
Communicate and look out for one another. And then, and only then, will you find the world.
We will find peace in all the world.
You'll find the world. And you will find in this shining world. Heroes among us and every boy and girl. Many have been broken, red hearts turn black. Love will melt the ice and turn it back, and you will find the world. You will find the world. You will find the world. And when you find a place called home, where everyone is free to roam, a whole new world, a better place for our children's futures at stake. And you'll find, with music in your soul, laughter in your hearts, together we can grow a better place, with love in our soul. And you will find, together we can save it all. And you will find, a place called home, where everyone
Rawr.
We cover digital audio workstations and music tools. We explore theory, gear at 82. How to arrange, compose, and the art of arranging. Taking a look at AI and how the times have changed. On a PC or a Mac and even with a mobile device, we'll be talking about it all every Thursday night. From software to plugins and synths that entice. Dive deep into tech and let creativity take flight. Talkin IT. We're talking IT. Come and join in and have some fun. It's highly educational with a lot to learn. From bedroom producers to seasoned pros, we're breaking it down so knowledge grows. Whether you're a DJ or a beat making wizard, we got the tips and tricks to make your sound sizzle. Mixing and mastering, that's our jam. With the tutorials and tips on how much rev. Get the best quality from your setup and gear. Tune in every week and lend us your ear. We're talking IT. Come and join in and have some fun. It's highly educational with a lot to learn. We're talking We're talking IT. We're talking IT. Every Thursday night on Angified.
That way.
Ooh, I'm going to be breaking my neck tonight.
Indeed. Whiplash.
I'm going to go this side so that way I look like I'm looking at you.
Sounds fair.
Yeah.
I'll go over here.
Hello there.
How we doing on a Thursday? Always good to see you.
Doing good. Yeah, we're
look
getting ready. Yeah, we're getting ready to tone it up. Got to thank our residential unicorn for suggesting this topic. He sent the opening video that we're going to look at and got me thinking of tone sculpting. You know, shaping your sound on your instrument, and the one that made the most sense was to start with is guitar. I'd like to cover some of the other instruments in future episodes, but guitar is the one that, you know, a lot of the sculpting really happens the most.
Yeah, definitely. Whether it comes to pedals, whether it comes to the different types of find. I mean, not to downplay synths, because there's plenty of crafting going on over there as well, where you can get really granular with, you know, a saw wave and a sine wave and getting all that kind of stuff working over there. But at the same time, with the guitars, a lot of it comes down to the feel and, you know, and the sound, obviously, when you're, you know, when you're doing these little setup adjustments, and whether we're talking about different guitars or different kinds of minor little adjustments on any guitar, there's different things that can all affect your tone and the way you play, the way you attack the strings, the type of wood. There's so many factors, but we just want to dive into a couple of them today. And we'll probably have, you know, like we said, future nights where we'll go into more, you know, whether it's the synth stuff or whether it's, you know, getting into other things with bass and, you know, vocal tone crafting as well, you know, looking at the different types of things you might want to do to a vocal chain to get that kind of thing going. So those could be things that we'll look at another time. But tonight we decided to start with guitar tone crafting.
Yeah, and as I was looking through the different videos, I wanted to find ones that did focus more on like the guitar differences. And, you know, we're going to get into like amps, because with guitars, a lot of times it's all about the amp and what you do there. But it's also going to get into a little bit of like the guitar engineering and the dynamics and what actually makes your tone on a guitar. Here, let's bring up the videos that we've got for tonight. And right off the the first one that we're going to look at, I love this one. This is the one that Uni sent me, and just got me really thinking. The question he asks here, which is, where does the tone come from for an electric guitar? And he takes a nice testing approach. So we're gonna hear examples, and he's gonna really ask the question, like, where an electric guitar gets its tone to start. And that's going to be coming from Jim Lil Jim. Yep, at Jim Lil over in YouTube, and he's a Nashville musician, country boy.
Nice.
Yeah, it looks like he's got some great stuff here. Definitely going to want to check out more of his tested series. I love these musicians that go through the tests, because, you know, we're constantly talking about like testing out the gear itself. So it's nice when you can find a channel that does that.
Absolutely. They bring a, you know, and it depends on the scientific method that they bring to it as well. And a lot of times they'll give you good comparisons, like, you know, here's a before and an after, and they'll put them right next to each other. So if you were trying to do the comparison yourself, you know, you play something as a before and then you make your change and you play something as an after, but it's hard to, you know, do an A and B comparison if you don't record them and get them, you know, side by side, so you can really hear the differences.
Yeah, and one thing that really impressed me here is he really does it like a true test. There's a lot of control subject. Like he doesn't go just trying out like different guitars with different strings, and you know, he keeps it apples to apples. So
exactly.
After we look at the electric guitar tone, we're going to take a quick slide to the side, and we're going to look at acoustic tone, because it's a whole different world, guitars with the acoustic.
Absolutely.
And I really was interested with this channel, Guitar Interactive Magazine. Like this is one that we should have been a nice freshie, you know, brand new for us, but one that I'm surprised like we hadn't been to before, because this.
Yeah, you figure it would have come up in the algorithm by now.
Yeah. Well, actually, it did. Like it's one of the algorithm suggested, because we've got some really good algorithm now with all our channels we follow. And this one's at Guitar Interactive. And he's going to talk about make your acoustic guitar sound better. They got a whole tech tip series. So like this is just their part 2 in it, focusing on the acoustic guitar. What I liked with what I saw here is some of these suggestions, the advice he's going to give to help with making your tone better are really straightforward. You don't have to like get new stuff or get into effects and things like that. It's focusing on the acoustic guitar. So I think it's a good complement to looking at the electric tone.
Excellent.
And then, you know, like you can't talk about guitar tones without talking about amps. And
Indeed,
the best source that we could ever ask for there is the ones where we tend to get our amps and our equipment from. Sweetwater, the king of equipment resources, and some of the best information you're going to find when it comes to your gear. So we definitely had to check this out. This one is going to cover tube amps versus solid states, something that we were actually talking about the other night.
That's
what
right.
What the differences
I
are.
got my, the bass head that I use actually has both. So I was telling Tony that it's, you know, I have 2 separate volume controls on, you know, my bass head, where one is for the tubes and one is for the solid state. So I can, you know, have my tone be mostly the tube amp and then have a little bit of the solid state dialed in as well. Or I can have it just as a backup. You know, if the tubes go bad, then the solid state's there as a backup. So it's good to, you know, good to have those options available.
And that's what's cool nowadays. Like now you're seeing these hybrids, so you don't necessarily have to like pick one or the other. There's some nice in the middle solutions that we'll probably see as they show the differences and your options there. That one's going to be coming from at Sweetwater.
Nice.
And then after we
always
get
a good resource.
after we get familiar, with this side of the amp world, we're going to get into amp modelers, and this is an exciting for guitarists nowadays. It it's so cool that like you can load up all sorts of different amps without having to like fill your room with them. I mean, the irony is his room's full of them, but
Exactly.
what he's going to do is he's now like exploring the virtual options, and he's going to take a look at the virtual amp modelers and compare them to the ones that he's used physically, and ask that question like, can I throw all these out?
Well, my answer to that would be no, but would it be a realistic substitute in many situations? And the answer is kind of a yes. I mean, you can replace a lot of the stuff. I mean, we'll see what the video has, not to shortcut the whole video with a yes.
Well, and
but the
and it
you
comes
really can.
it comes down to where the benefits lie in sometimes using the modeler versus the physical, and he's going to get into that. Like I think the reason why he's looking more at it this way is because when you're doing post processing and mixing, and the benefits of being able to adjust the amp modeler after versus recording the wet track with the physical amp. I think this is why he's and it's the same with a lot of other physical equipment. I have physical synthesizers that I love the sounds that they have, but if I use them in recordings and I have to record the wet sound from that physical synth, I don't have the luxury afterwards of changing the patch, and I have to go re-record the track again. So there is some pluses to getting a VST version of this equipment.
Now, in some cases, would you be able to try to translate it back to MIDI and then translate it back into another instrument from there? Because once you've got it, I mean, if the recording was audio, that's like you're saying, that's a problem. But if you had it as the MIDI events, that would be different.
Well, and that's my benefit is typically when I record, I don't record audio. I sequence the MIDI, and if it is a MIDI track, then I can always route it to a different synthesizer, virtual or physical, and you have that convenience with MIDI. You don't always have that when you're talking like guitar amps and tones.
Exactly. And the other one would be the drum replacement that we talked about. Like, the fact that drums are very much of a binary thing, it's either a kick hit or it's not, kind of a thing. So it's easier to do like a drum replacement or a repatching the drums by just taking, you have an isolated drum track and you can just change the kit entirely just using the events that you have, because they're easier to strip apart than it would be for something like a keyboard, whether it's strings, keys, brass, whatever you're trying to do on the keys.
Yeah, and that's why nowadays you see a lot of engineers and producers opting to go with MIDI drums and the flexibility that they get there, rather than deal with like all the hassle of like, it still sounds beautiful to get acoustic drums, get the right mics, and it's still a fun thing to do, but it's a lot more work, it's a lot more resource, and a lot more expensive than just using the plug-in approach.
Exactly.
So this one's going to be coming from at Lonely Rocker, another freshie, good one that's going to be coming back here. Look at these videos. I'm going to be checking some of those out.
Indeed. Right up your
And we couldn't talk about guitar without finding like a sensei video. Really has become like one of my all-time favorite channels on YouTube. He covers everything, but like as a guitarist, it's one of the best guitar resources on YouTube, and he gives some of the best advice, period. And as I was looking through all the tone videos, came across him, and awful tone to amazing tone. He's gonna like really focus in on what is a bad tone and what is a good tone. So I thought that's a good way to kind of sum up like what we're going to be looking at at the sensei level.
Exactly. And that's one that, looking at the difference, because a lot of people, they would focus on, oh, here's the best tone, and they'll show you, what to dial in specifically. But this is a better lesson where it's saying, starting from something that's terrible and then trying to tweak, this is basically probably going to go through the process of how you would start tweaking the sound. Like, oh, you got to roll off some of the low end. You have to, boost the mids a little here, or whatever it is, like whatever the tweaks are going to be. You just have to be able to hear kind of what you're listening for, like what is awful about this tone that we need to change, and how would we go about changing it one setting at a time. And that's the other important thing, is you don't just change this and this, and then is that good? Oh no, then how do you know how to get back to what you had before? So kind of dialing in one thing at a time and know what you're listening for to make the changes that you need to make.
Yeah, and that's the real key, is recognizing when your tone doesn't sound good.
Oh yeah, because I've seen people, at open jams and what have you, where they've got their gear that they brought with them. They set it up, and one guy sounds fine. Next guy comes up with the microphone, same setting, same place, right in front of the amp, and it's just shredding everyone's face throughout the whole place. And some of it's a volume thing, obviously, but some people know how to use their amp more than others, where some people could take a very low powered amp and get a really powerful sound out of it, whereas other people could have a very high power amp and and you're having difficulty hearing them just because of the way that they play or the way they have things dialed in.
Yeah, and
so that's why it's important to see these.
The worst scenario you can have there is to have like, a bass tone fighting with a guitar tone, or two guitars and one has a nice tone and the other one doesn't. Like, I've heard that a lot, where you hear a nice rhythm guitar tone and then this lead guitarist comes in and it's like chalkboard is screeching, and that's what you want to avoid.
For sure. And that's where, anytime you're going to have two guitar players, they need to complement each other well in what they're playing. Like if two guys are just sitting there hammering on the same chords the whole time, because they're, two guys showing up together at an open jam and they want to play the same song, and they both know the rhythm part, so they're both playing the rhythm part. That's going to be a whole different story than two guys who complement each other, where one's playing the rhythm part and the other one's putting in little licks here and there to make the two parts go together better. And that's more of a Grateful Dead thing.
All the more important for those two guitar tones to like complement each other and not stomp on each other. And hey, Uni, thank you very much for the video you sent. This is going to be the one we're going to actually be starting with. And that came from our unicorn made Frankenstein. Great suggestion. Happy to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. And which page were we starting with this one?
This one's Jim Lil Jim.
Right. All right.
Over at Jim
That's
Lil.
a new one for me.
Yep. And again, a channel I'm going to be going back to because I like the testers, and he is a tester. I mean, you can see just from the videos that are up here, he tests everything. And what you'll see is he does proper testing, doesn't just like, oh, this is what it sounds like, oh, this is what it like. He keeps it controlled and is really searching in this case for where does the tone come from for an electric guitar. Awesome question.
Exactly. And he's got 5 factors right here, so let's see what he's got.
Oh, it's Lily, huh? Jim Lily. Oh, no, it was a typo. Well, at YouTube,
Jim will tell us.
It's going to be at Jim Lil over on YouTube as far as the at name.
There you go. Perfect.
So
where does the tone come from?
Yeah, let's see where we get our tone from on an electric guitar.
Over the holidays, I wanted to find out the truth about where the tone comes from in an electric guitar. What makes one electric guitar sound different from another when they're plugged into the same amp? I've read and heard all sorts of ways that every single part on the guitar can make a difference in the sound, but I don't actually know if any of that's true. I wanted to take the time to actually test them and capture the results with audio and video so you guys can see for yourself and decide what you think's important too. First thing I did was email 3 very high-end guitar builders whose guitars I've personally played and enjoyed very much. And I asked them the question, what 5 factors in an electric guitar make the most difference in the amplified sound? Here's how they responded. I was surprised at how different their lists were from each other. And with these factors in mind, I needed a test guitar that I could hack up and change parts on without feeling stress, so I bought a kit for $100 and put it together. As a baseline, I tested it against my Tom Anderson Telly because almost everything about the Anderson is different than the parts caster. The only difference here, and with any test in this video, is the guitars. Everything after the guitar is identical. And everything before the guitar, so the player, the picks, the strings, the spot on the strings where the pick hits, how hard the pick hits, how fast the pick hits, all of that is controlled as tightly as I can. So the only difference that you're hearing is the difference between the guitars. This list is long, but it's finite, so I started chipping away at it. The first thing I did was replace the pickup in the parts caster with a Seymour Duncan vintage stack and tested that. And after testing that, I compared it to the Anderson, which also has a vintage stack. Then I tried a pickup height test. The pickup was set at kind of a medium level, so then I cranked it down really low and then up really high to see if that made a difference. After that, I continued forward through a bunch of tests, including sanding the headstock down to a normal shape, having a loose versus tight neck joint, I tried brass saddles versus steel, using a traditional thin steel ashtray bridge instead of the longer, thicker steel bridge that came with the kit. I tried top loading the strings versus putting the strings through the body. And I tried using a strap bridge with no plate. When I did the no plate test, the crude pickup mount I fashioned wasn't very stable, and I couldn't keep the pickup in one spot. The differences I noticed even during the same take based on tiny amounts the pickup was moving frustrated me because I couldn't accurately test the strap bridge, and I hadn't really been paying close attention to how close the pickup was to the strings. So I started to wonder whether the tests I had done were even valid, and if any difference heard between the bridges or the neck joint or the headstock shape was just from the pickup being slightly different distances from the strings before and after the modifications I'd done. This came to a head when I was testing necks, and I'd put the parts caster neck on my blue Strat copy to see how much difference an unfinished maple fretboard neck had from a finished rosewood fretboard neck. The heel angle didn't exactly match, so the action was ridiculously high, and I made the prediction before testing that with the strings so far away, the tone would sound weaker no matter what the differences in the necks were. So I asked myself, what if I militantly matched the distance from the pickup to the strings? I got my feeler gauges and measured the distance from the low E string to the pickup and the high E string to the pickup on my Anderson and matched it as close as I could on the parts caster. Then I tested it. This was a turning point for me. There were a lot of things different about these two guitars, and not a lot that was the same. At this point in testing, here's a list of all the things that these two guitars had in common. I became more interested in testing the things that were on this list, and a big one was the guitar body. What if I took a radically different approach? Could it sound the same as my Anderson? I'm out in the barn, and it's time to pick a new guitar. So, this one looks good to me. Got it. This is the 2x4 guitar. It was made from a piece of scrap wood bolted to a neck from a 72 reissue thin-line telly. The neck has a thick finish on it and a 3-bolt neck joint. The neck radius is 7.25 inches. Steel saddles were installed in place of the brass ones on the bridge. The strings are top-loaded. The pickup was wired directly to the output jack with no electronics in between. But it had a Seymour Duncan vintage stack pickup just like the Anderson, and the height had been precisely adjusted. So I tested it. I couldn't get it to exactly match. I thought maybe the bodywood does play a role, or maybe it's something to do with the neck finish, but I was hearing a harsh top end, so my thought was that maybe it's because I wired straight from the pickup to the output jack and didn't include any electronics to bleed highs off to ground. So I installed electronics. This was the bingo moment for me. I had the data. I captured it on video. You just saw it. At this point, here's what the two guitars did have in common. That's a pretty small list. I was satisfied with my research and ready to stop, but I had this voice in my head of all the players and builders out there who have thought about electric guitar a certain way for much longer than I have, and that seeing a 2x4 plank guitar still might not be a grand enough gesture to push past deeply rooted beliefs, so I went even farther for one last test. This is the air guitar. I made it out of a bench and a shelf. My dad made the bench in 1990 for repairing motorcycles. The shelf is upside down, sitting on two chairs and weighted down with a pair of Honda engines. The ends of the shelf are braced against the bench with 2x4s so the strings don't pull the shelf closer to the bench when tuned up. The headstock is a piece of wood with tuners put in it. The nut is the bottom half of a metal locking nut meant to go with a Floyd Rose type bridge. 25.5 inches away are the steel saddles on the steel top-loaded bridge with a Seymour Duncan vintage stack mounted in the plate, and all of that screwed into the bench. The pickup is wired to a disembodied telly control plate with a 250K volume pot. This is wired to a jack, and a guitar cable goes from the jack straight to my combo amp. The air guitar was tuned to open D, and so was my Anderson telly. I matched their pickup heights and strummed an open chord on both multiple times on the same spot on the strings. Here are the things that the Anderson and the air guitar had in common. Tuning, strings, scale length, pickup distance to strings, pickup position along the strings, pickup slant angle, and effective volume pop value. In the future, I'll be looking deeper into these factors. Hopefully you'll join me.
That's awesome.
Most definitely awesome.
Oh, and we will definitely be joining you for more of those journeys.
Indeed, breaking it down to like the essence of what are the similarities and differences. Very cool.
Oh, that's a dude I could totally hang out with. Like building your own guitar out of a 2x4. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Well, the important point there just being that it's, you know, it's not all about getting the brand name one. It's not about spending 10 grand on on it. If you pay attention to, the important factors of what makes it work, you can get down to the science of it and science yourself up a guitar, because people have made cigar box guitars all the time, little slide guitars, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times it is just something that you can throw together. So it is fun to have a little project like that. Especially if you've got some woodworking skills.
He did make good points about like where tone would be affected, the location of the pickups and the distances on the string, the action you're going to get out of it. I mean, these are all important considerations.
Mm-hmm. Now the workbench you definitely don't carry to the show, but the little 2x4 would be no problem. You could just put a little handle on the back, put a little strap on it, and just like throw it over your shoulder.
Well, he's resourceful. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns everything into an instrument.
Yeah, I have seen little. If you've seen basses that have no headstock, I was talking about it the other day. Like a bass with no headstock, where the tuners you would tune it in the body itself, and the body is usually quite small as well. The idea being it's not as heavy as a regular 5-string. Like my 5-string bass is quite a heavy instrument, but if you were to take off the headstock and 70% of the body weight by just chopping, essentially chopping it all off, that's about what this other bass looks like. It has great tone, and a lot of that is probably the electronics again. And there needs to be a certain amount of body wood there for to get that tone, but that doesn't have to be wood. I mean, I've seen instruments made out of aluminum as well, things like that. But for the resonance, the idea is that there is some resonance going on inside the instrument.
Well, and there's always a lot of debate on like whether the wood changes the guitar tone. I've heard guitarists like go back and forth on, certain woods sound better than others for guitars. So that's another one. As we explore tones, we'll probably go back to that.
Uni made his own 2x4 guitar. Nice. I was going to mention something like Stradivarius, for example, with the fantastic violins from a certain period. A lot of it does come down to the wood from that period and what the conditions were that led up to that made them sound so amazing, in addition to the expert craftsmanship.
Now,
some of it does come down to the conditions.
And that kind of leads us into our next one. Before we switch over, at Jim Lil over on YouTube. Awesome stuff, Jim.
Very cool.
We will be back. And when it comes to acoustics, would you say like wood has more of a factor on the acoustic side of a guitar?
I would say so, and it also comes down to the construction, of course, and that's where if you were to just get the cheapest dreadnought you could find, the cheapest just acoustic that looks like that you could find, or if you're going for the one that's $5,000, $10,000, those all make big differences in the quality with any instrument, with any type of instrument you get. But I'd say even more so with an acoustic, where a really, really cheap acoustic probably feels and sounds pretty cheap, but there are things that you can do to make it sound better, which I'm sure we're going to get into here. One of which, like that I did with mine, was changing the nut from a plastic nut to a bone nut, for example. It's something that can change and give you a little more sustain and a little bit of a different tone. Plus, my guitar, the acoustic that I was using, has a little bit deeper of a body. Like it'll look like that kind of, but it has a slightly rounded back, not like an Ovation where it's fully rounded and made out of, what looks like plastic. But in this case, it's just the back of the wood. There's a little bit more depth to the body, so there's a little bit more body to the sound, and a little bit deeper of a sound from the acoustic itself.
And we have looked at some like acoustic guitar hacks on some of our other guitar nights where like a little $15 doohickey really changed the sound of the guitar. So like you can do some things with acoustics that will help you shape your tone just like you can with an electric. What I like with this one, a lot of it is more natural adjustment of tone more than like getting a bunch of mods and gear. It's more understanding the way the acoustic guitar works, how you actually hold it. Some things that like as I was watching, I thought, wow, this should be like common sense, but it's not. You don't always think of it. And I really like when I found this channel. This is a great freshie for us. Guitar Interactive. This is a guitar channel.
Nice.
And I see Steve Bob there. I see Vivian Campbell in there. Rick Savage. Joe Bonamassa. Like my guitar channel. and what they're going to be talking about here is making your acoustic guitar sound better, how you can improve your acoustic sound with sometimes like real simple approach.
And I believe this is even part 2.
Yeah. They have a whole bunch of tech series, and with the acoustic, they have a whole bunch of them. This is just one part, so I suggest if you guys like this, go and check out the whole series. We have a lot of acoustic guitarists, especially over on the lab, and this is good information if you do like to play the acoustic.
All right, let's make the acoustic sound better.
Hi guys, Nick Jennison for Guitar Interactive and GI Plus. Welcome to this lesson brought to you by Elixir Strings, where we're going to discuss how you can customize the sound of your acoustic guitar. Now, much effort and energy is spent on tweaking and customizing the sounds of our electric guitars by swapping pickups out, changing pedals and amplifiers, and sometimes even cables, and that is a fine way to adjust the way your electric guitar sounds. But for acoustic guitars, that level of electronic wizardry is really just not available to us. However, there are lots of steps we can take to get the absolute best sound out of your acoustic guitar, and we are going to begin by discussing some technical issues just to get them out of the way, because we want to kind of remove any possibility of user error, some technical issues that may be preventing your acoustic guitar from sounding its best. And we're going to begin by talking about the position of your arm on the guitar's top. Now, the guitar's top is effectively like the speaker in an amplifier. It's the thing that vibrates and projects the sound forward. And if you put too much of yourself on it, for example, if you tend to play like this, or like this, or whatever, and you're really kind of crushing the guitar's top or resting on the guitar's top excessively, it can stop it from vibrating at its absolute best, the way the builder intended. So let's explore the effect of that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by playing in my normal playing position where I don't have very much skin on the top of the guitar at all, and then I'm really going to kind of hug it and show you what difference that makes. Let's take a listen to that now. The next consideration is going to be the position of your pick on the strings, specifically where you are across the guitar's playing area. We're going to start by playing somewhere around the sound hole kind of area, then I'll move it way back here and then way forward towards the neck. Let's take a listen to what difference that makes to the tone. And the last technique consideration is how angled your pick attack is, i.e. is your pick flat against the strings or are you angling it at more of a 45-degree angle? I'm going to progressively angle this pick as we go forward. So we're going to start with a very flat position and then we'll go to a slight angle and then more and more and more angle. It's going to get more chirpy but perhaps also a little bit more rounded in the high end as we get more angled. Let's take a listen to that now. Okay, so now that we've excluded any technical errors that might be affecting the sound of your acoustic guitar, let's take a look at the most inexpensive and easiest way to change the way your guitar sounds, which is to use a different kind of pick. To that end, we've got 5 picks we're going to take a look at. We have 2 Ultex Prime Tone Jazz 3s. They're these little brown guys here. One is very well worn and one is fresh out of the packet, so we'll use that to compare the effect of the pick's tip. We also have 2 Tortex Jazz 3s. We've got a lighter 0.73mm pick and then a more rigid 1.14mm pick. And lastly, we've got the gold standard for strumming, which is a nylon Jim Dunlop 0.6mm pick. Let's start by comparing the effect of the materials of our picks. So we're going to start with a Prime Tone Jazz 3, a Tortex Jazz 3, and then our nylon pick. And last but not least, let's compare the effect of a new pick versus an old pick. I'm going to use a very well-worn Ultex Prime Tone Jazz 3, and then we'll switch to a brand new one. Next up, let's compare the effect of pick gauge using exactly the same materials. So we're going to compare a 1.14mm jazz Tortex to a 0.73mm jazz Tortex. Let's start with the heavier pick and then we'll switch to the lighter pick. So some takeaways from those pick tests. First of all, as a rule of thumb, when it comes to pick gauge, a lighter pick is going to sound brighter and a thicker pick is going to sound a little darker and a little more focused in the low end and in the fundamentals of the tone. So if you want sparkle, maybe reach for a lighter pick. If you want a little more richness and a little more low end thump, maybe reach for a thicker pick. Now in terms of material, our Ultex picks had a little more chirp and a little bit more kind of pick clack, whereas the Tortex picks had a little bit less of that chirpy sound going on. They were a little more rounded in the high end. And the nylon pick, again, this is probably more to do with the gauge than the material, was super bright and super sparkly, but it was also quite difficult to play with because it's so thin. So that's a consideration too. Anyway, on to some strings. Now we're going to take a look at some different string materials and different string gauges supplied to us by our friends at Elixir. We're going to begin by taking a look at the difference between 80-20 bronze, which is probably the most common acoustic guitar string. This is a really bright and focused sounding string, whereas phosphor bronze, which is perhaps the second most common acoustic guitar type of string, has a much more full and rich sound. So depending upon your application, if you're trying to fit in with a band and maybe you want that real bright, sparkly sound, maybe you're going to reach for one string type, whereas if you're a solo player, maybe you'll reach for another. We're also going to compare coatings. Now, the two different coatings we have here are the thinner nanoweb coating and the slightly thicker polyweb coating, which are in these blue packs here. So polyweb's going to have a little less string noise, it's going to have a slightly warmer kind of tone when compared to the brightness of the polyweb coated strings. And as if that wasn't enough, we're also going to compare two different gauges. We're going to do 10 to 47 when compared to 12 to 56. Now, up until this point, you've been listening to us playing 80-20 bronze strings with a nanoweb coating, which is the thinner coating, and it's a 12 to 56 gauge. So we might as well start there. So let's take a listen first of all to the effect of our string gauge on the sound. So we're going to begin with just 80-20 bronze, and we'll compare the effect of 12s to 10s. Next up, let's take a listen to the different string materials we have, specifically 80-20 bronze versus phosphor bronze. And the way we'll do this is we'll do 12s in both materials and then 10s in both materials. And last but not least, let's take a listen to the difference that different coating makes. For this, we're just going to use sets of 12s. So let's compare the difference between an 80-20 bronze with the polyweb coating versus an 80-20 bronze with the slightly thinner nano web coating. So there you go, guys. That's been a look at how you can manipulate some of the variables that are available to you with your acoustic guitar to improve and customize the sound of your guitar and get it just in the spot where you like it. Now, unfortunately, we can't take, say, a very small parlor guitar and make it sound like a dreadnought, let's say, by using these little tricks that we've discussed today, but we absolutely can refine the sound of a guitar that you're already fond of. So if you find a guitar that you really like the tone of, I really like this Taylor American Dream, for example, you can really get it in the zone, you can get it dialed in just how you want it, and you can also tweak that with a single guitar to fit a bunch of different musical settings, especially with picks, because you keep them in your pocket. So that's a really nice, easy way to tweak things from song to song, but from gig to gig or session to session, changing strings is another really great way to get your guitar's tone exactly where you want it to be for a particular musical setting. So there you go, guys. One more time, this has been a look at customizing the sound of your acoustic guitar. My name's Nick Jennison for Guitar Interactive and GI Plus, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the links that you can see right here for more videos on more of the same. I'm sure you're going to like them just as much. Also, don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons, which are somewhere down here, and this little bell icon, which is going to let us notify you when we drop new videos. And you can check out the exclusive lesson platform, GI Plus, which is available at the link in the description. I think you're going to love it.
Oh, and we both love that Taylor American Dream as well.
Indeed.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous sound. I love his point that, like, there is differences between different acoustic guitars. So as you're looking for your tone, you're going to want to pick the right acoustic, but showing that with just a little bit of modification in technique with that guitar, once you do have it, you can really give it that chirp that he was showing, or the extra sustain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pick selection, string, string gauge, string type. A lot of it all has factors, and it's good to be able to hear the differences like that, just in a straight A to B like that, which we love, because that gives you that. And again, like he was what he was mentioning about the little parlor guitar versus the big dreadnought, that's a place where if you had a big dreadnought that you wanted to sound more like the parlor guitar, there are some things that you could do to make it sound smaller or brighter than instead of darker and bigger. And likewise, you could take that little parlor guitar and do some of these changes to make it sound bigger and darker. You can't get all the way from one to the other, but you can see how you could modify using these techniques to make things, shift one way or the other, which is kind of
cool. And in some cases, like all his testing there and his examples was from a mic. Like, he had that mic in front of the guitar, and we were hearing those samples from a mic'd acoustic. If you got a line signal, your mileage is going to vary there.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And that's where also with the testing, the scientific nature of the testing, the idea is to try to play in the same position at the same, at the same intensity, all of that. Like he's trying to play the exact same thing, the exact same way, in the exact same position each time.
I was watching to see like if there was any variance in where the mic was in front of the hole, and he was pretty damn consistent.
Yeah, that is one of the important things about that test is to try to, in order to do apples to apples, you really need all the factors that you can to be as identical as possible, except the one thing that you're trying to test for.
And he did hit all the points you were talking about: strings, picks, like these, especially on the acoustic side. I feel like you hear the differences more. I love being able to hear him as he changed the different strings. Like it's more noticeable for me sometimes with the acoustic than sometimes with the electrics. A lot of times with the electrics, you get caught up in other things and you don't always hear the difference as drastic.
And a lot of times it is like you're saying, the effects, the saturation of the effects, or the interaction with the amp. People get too tied up in the tone crafting, let's say, rather than what they're actually playing. Whereas with the acoustic, there are certain things that you can change through the dynamics and through these little tweaks that we're talking about here. But at the same time, it's less of a swing than it would be with guitar, where you can just dial in all these effects and just play and it'll sound a certain way. Whereas on an acoustic, you try to do the same thing and it doesn't get dressed up as much, so it comes more down to the way you're actually playing.
Yeah. And there are acoustic players who do run, if they do have a line signal or with their mic, they run it through like a processor afterwards to kind of play it like an electric guitar. And acoustic can really sound cool with electric effects if you experiment.
Oh, yeah.
But it's
and
nice to get that natural tone first.
Yeah. I've also seen electric guitar players where a guy who plays a Telecaster and then uses an acoustic simulator, a pedal. So it's just a little pedal, but you kick that in and it'll change. He's still playing his Tele, but it sounds like he's playing an acoustic.
Yeah,
so that's cheating.
And I've had a few times where I've listened to recordings and I'm thinking like, damn, he's playing an acoustic, and it turns out he's not.
He was shredding like, and it's like, that's really difficult to do on an acoustic. Or at least I find it more difficult to play fast or shredding, for example, on an acoustic than it would be on a speed metal shredder guitar, for example.
But hey, if you do want to train your fingers and get better on the electric, practicing on the acoustic sometimes will actually get you in faster shape, and it's a little more work.
It'll toughen your fingers up too. As far as those, a lot of times I find with the acoustic, it's if you are used to doing any kind of sliding at all, like it's kind of cheese grater time. It's kind of like with my bass. The bass strings are quite fat and have that cheese grater effect if you do a lot of sliding. But I love to do a lot of sliding when I'm playing, just so I end up, but I've become immune to basically the problems with that because I play for hours, all the time. So, it's no longer a problem. I can just play and slide and not have to worry about it. Where in the early days, if I tried to slide more than a couple of times in a week, like I'd be, losing layers of the tips of my fingers.
No, just watch out if smoke starts coming out of your neck.
Exactly. But that's the thing. I had to build up the amount that I could play over time. But now I feel like there's really no limit. Like it's not a hand strength thing. I can play, for hours as far as hand strength goes, but also with the toughness of the skin or the calluses that built up over time. Make it so that you can just keep playing and playing and not have a problem with it. But that's also, I play finger style. So a lot of times with the bass, it's the fingers that I'm picking with. If I'm playing things like Ozzy, for example, if I'm playing a bass part, if I'm doing a lot of notes, then I can burn out my right hand if I do too much too long. But usually that's only if I tried to do that. If I were to try to play super fast for hours and hours, that would be a different story. But I usually play, pretty tame stuff when it comes to that. Throw in a fast one here and there, but it's not.
Yeah, if you mix it up, you don't wear yourself out too quick.
Exactly. But yeah, some great points there about the acoustic, and again the different materials. It's important to hear those differences and understand those differences, and to see the way that these tests are done, so that you can do those tests for yourself. Because it may be that you have a guitar that you love how it feels, but you always hated how it sounds, so you never play it. And it could be that when we're talking about pickup heights before, it could be something in the pickup heights. It could be something in that could change the entire dynamics of how it not only sounds but also how it feels and how it responds to you. So. These are important things
and like he showed there in the case of acoustic, just how you rest your arm on top of it can make a tonal difference.
Absolutely. I could never understand how my buddy Mike could play an acoustic there's no strap on the acoustic, and he would just take it and like tuck it under his arm and play. And to me, it just feels like, it feels like it would fall out as soon as I would start trying to pick. It would feel like it would fall away, but it doesn't. I mean, it's fine. It's right there. It's all good. But to me, it would always be like I'd be sitting down with it sitting on my leg and my arm coming over the top.
No, it could be
it
worse.
was
You
just a different.
could be dealing with one of those ovations where it's like rolling in your
Yeah,
lap.
well, that was he actually had an ovation as one of his acoustics, and that was the one that when his younger son was probably 3 years old, 4 years old, whatever it was, he was dragging it across the house and using it as a step stool, like putting the string side down and then just stepping up on it to get up on top of the mantle to get something he needed over there. But I mean, that's a sturdy guitar. It didn't care. The guitar couldn't care less. But just to see, basically it was like Bam Bam dragging a club across the floor, and it was an acoustic guitar, and I'm like, what?
Well, you're really gonna get in trouble for stealing them cookies if you use my
Yeah.
guitar to get them.
Bam Bam.
Well, I'm glad we went down this rabbit hole tonight, because this is another great channel. I'm so glad that we found it, at Guitar Interactive. Reviews, interviews, lessons, and more. I mean, I'm loving what I'm seeing here.
Absolutely.
Gonna be back for a visit.
Absolutely.
Gonna be back for a visit.
Indeed.
So now that we've looked at electric guitars and acoustic guitars, we're gonna start to look at the amp side and see how you can sculpt your tone, through the amp, which is, I think, how most guitarists do their sound sculpting.
Yep. And that's the thing, is a lot of them don't understand what differences they can make in the guitar side. They think it all comes down to just the amp and the pedal chain, to be fair. I mean, a lot of people, I've had friends who they basically looked at one of their favorite guitarists. Like if they like Fish, for example, they'll look at Trey Anastasia and they'll look at what he has in his rig and what he's trying to accomplish with the tone crafting that he's doing. And they try to approximate that. Like, they can't spend what he spent on his pedals, because I mean, they can spend a lot of money on their pedals, but if he's using, a compressor and then a tube screamer and then this and then that, he's trying to match piece by piece what's going on in that rig so that he can try to reproduce those sounds. So it depends on what you're trying to do, also what your influences are, what kind of music you're trying to reproduce, whether it's your own music or whether it's covers.
Yeah, and before you get into the effects chain and all of that, the amp that you use and the initial settings, a lot of times, like you said, they'll pick an amp because it's the tone that my Guitar Hero gets, and then they set it and forget it, and they never really get to know the different adjustments on the amp. They just kind of stick to that go-to, which, it's good to have a reliable tone, your go-to tone, but it's also good to know what your amp's capable of.
Absolutely. And the other big thing is from song to song. You might have to, if you're going to be playing a wide variety of music, you're playing something from, the 60s or 50s, and then you're going to play something from the 80s, and then you're going to play something from the 2000s. You're going to want different tones for the different things that you're doing. And you may need to adjust that at the amp itself and at the, and again, the tone crafting that you're doing with pedals. That's where, in some cases, some of the videos that we'll look at on another day, for tone crafting in general, or specifically with guitar, comes down to how you're playing, going through whether you got a compressor or a delay pedal, things like that, what kind of amp you're going through, but just trying to look at how to accomplish different sounds, like surf rock as a sound, or a very clean classical sound, or a jazz thing, or a funk, any kind of genre that you want to think about. There's a specific tone that probably lives in that, in there specifically. And it's good to be able to accomplish all of those with your equipment. So understanding how to get all those sounds is important, whether it's through a solid state amp, or whether it's through the amp modding, or whether it's through the pedals, or whether it's just through the way you play, and whether you're using the neck pickup or the bridge pickup.
Technically, it's a little bit of everything. The more you get comfortable with each one of those aspects, the more you're gonna be able to really control your sound sculpting. And with this one, what I found interesting with it is the the eternal debate of tube versus solid state. And some old schoolers especially will insist that tube, the warmth of the tube, and they really insist on that as their choice. But it comes with some inconveniences. I mean, tubes are getting harder and harder to replace, depending on how old your amp is, and more expensive.
Indeed. but worth investigating, because seeing the differences and how good the solid state has gotten at reproducing that tube sound, if that's what they're looking for.
We finally reached a point where, like, the solid state is kind of taking over, partly from convenience and partly from the fact that it's sounds damn close these days. Like, the discerning ear might hear a difference, but
if it can get that close with none of the downside of tubes, like you were saying, the supply chain or what have you, you're bypassing all of that and getting, if you can get 95% of the way there, is that close enough for most applications? And a lot of people would say yes. As you said, there's some that would never settle for anything except tubes, but that's when they're looking for that particular sound.
Yeah, and the other big consideration for a lot of guitars is cost. So
right.
As the solid states have really, the cost ratio is getting to the point where it sometimes makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it could even be where you live. If you live in a climate that's super cold all the time, you probably don't want to be bringing tubes out in the cold.
That's a real important consideration, especially if you're using them to play out a lot. And so this one, we're getting it right from the equipment source, Sweetwater at Sweetwater. Whatever musician you are out there, if you buy any music equipment, you probably heard of them. If you've never shopped there, you should consider giving them a try. They have the best customer support. You find a good rep there, and they will sit and listen to your needs and help you find exactly what you're looking for. And then they'll check with you after you got that equipment to make sure that, like, everything's good and you're happy. And that's what you want out of a music retailer.
Exactly. Yep. I've had the exact same experience. Exactly.
Yeah. I've bought from several different big places over the last 25 years. And, I like having a local place. I would kill to have like a Sweetwater next to me. That would be heaven. Guitar Center was my go-to for local. And, over the years, I used to be a big Musician's Friend guy. And even AMC was another one that, like, I used for some time. But Sweetwater, once I started getting gear from there, it's been a love relationship ever since.
Exactly. And I think pretty much all of the PA gear, all of the, the mains, the monitors, the board, like everything that we do with all the stuff that Mike did, I'm pretty sure all of it came from Sweetwater. I mean, he's worked with them extensively over a decade. Easily.
Anything really important for a studio that if I was getting, I'd want to get it through them. They between their warranties, their extended warranties that you can get, and the confidence that like, they're going to be around tomorrow. Like some of those ones I mentioned, unfortunately, they're getting harder and harder to find, or they're non-existent. Like, Guitar Centers have been disappearing. There's only a couple of them left.
Yeah. And it'd probably be worthwhile for us to, try to get in touch with Sweetwater and see what they would have to, say, if they had some things that they wanted us, as things come in, maybe things they want us to demo or check out.
Yeah. And
we'll be in touch.
And they are cool like that. They do hook people up with some good review gear. Indeed. That's how some of these channels, and when we're looking at, like, gear nights and things like that, that's how a lot of them are getting to try these things out.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a look at the tube versus the solid state and what's the difference. They give an awesome explanation of, like, each one, the pluses and the minuses on each side. And if you're a new guitarist and you're considering, like, getting an amp, this is good information for you before you go out and get one. Don't just buy it because your favorite guitarist uses it. Buy it because it's what you're going to need.
Yeah, buy it because it solves your needs. Exactly. Your specific needs.
So let's take a look at amps versus solid state.
Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. When we're talking about guitar amplifiers, a common question that comes up is which is better, tube or solid state? I've got both types here, a tube amp as well as a solid state amp, and it can certainly be confusing to sort through the benefits of each type of amplifier. In fact, the question gets even murkier because in modern amps, we also have modeling to consider. There have also been an increasing number of what you might call hybrid amps that combine different technologies together. So let's start our conversation today about tubes versus solid state with some definitions and descriptions of the various technologies involved. In all cases, what we're talking about is taking the very small electrical signal that a guitar pickup puts out and raising its level or amplifying it to the point where it's strong enough to drive a speaker. This requires a huge increase in power. To achieve this huge increase in power, amplifiers typically use two stages. The first is a preamp stage, which raises the tiny signal from the guitar pickups to what's called line level. This is the signal level that you might see come out of a studio preamp or compressor or other piece of gear, and similar to the level that most keyboards put out. The preamp stage is where you'd find the gain and volume controls, the different channels, and the tone stack or EQ controls. And it's where the tone of the guitar signal is largely shaped. The second stage of the amplifier is called the power amplifier, and it takes that preamplified signal and dramatically increases its level so that it can cause a speaker to physically move. There typically isn't a lot of tone shaping that goes on in this section, aside from the power amp circuitry, of course, although sometimes you see presence, resonance, and similar controls that actually function inside the power amp section. Between these two stages, the preamp and the power amp sections, is where the effects send and return will be located if your amp has one. Now, the differences come in because designers use different components to build these stages in the amp. In a tube amplifier, typically 12AX7 tubes would be used for the gain and so on in the preamp section. In the power section, you might find 6V6, 6L6, EL84, EL34, KT66, KT88, or other large power tubes doing the heavy lifting. Each of these tube types has a different tonal signature, different distortion characteristics, and different response characteristics, and so on, that contribute to the overall sound quality and feel of the amp. There are some tweaky electronic design things that also affect how the tubes sound. An important one of these is whether the amp is operating Class AB, where pairs of tubes work together to amplify the signal, or Class A, where each power tube is used to amplify the entire signal. There's a big tonal difference, response, feel, and efficiency difference between these two operating classes. A key component here in tube amplifiers is that the power tubes require a transformer to match the tube output with what the speaker wants to see. The transformer also contributes a tonal signature, saturation characteristics, and more to the overall sound. With a solid-state amp, all those tubes would be replaced with transistors. Transistors perform the same function as the tubes, making the signal louder, either in the preamp or in the power amp. There are two approaches here. One uses transistors to directly generate the tone, simply using them in place of the tubes. The other approach is where some of the murkiness comes in. Many amps that technically are solid-state, because they have no tubes, also use digital processing to emulate the function of tube components and tone, whether through modeling, profiling, convolution, IRs, or whatever other technology. Now, both these approaches can work fine. A non-modeling solid-state amp will have its own tone that may or may not be tube-like. Examples would include the Quilter line of amplifiers, the Orange Crush Pro amps like this one beside me, the Roland Jazz Chorus amps, and so on. A solid-state amp with modeling or digital processing will use computer algorithms to recreate the characteristics of tubes and transformers, and it tries to replicate the sound of a tube or possibly even a solid-state amp. I've seen modeled amps that emulate a jazz chorus, for example. All this is fine. When we're talking about tone, it's not the technology that matters, but the result. Still, the technology is what generates the tone, so we need to look at some of the differences. At their most basic, tubes take an incoming signal and make it louder using the electricity coming from the wall outlet. That's why they're known as valves in some parts of the world. Transistors do the same thing. The difference is that tubes are fairly non-linear, meaning their response and characteristics change as the signal level changes. When you push them harder and harder, tubes go gradually and smoothly into clipping, meaning they no longer accurately reproduce the signal. Our ears perceive this as distortion, and it largely consists of additional harmonic content that's added into the signal. With tubes, these harmonics are mostly even order, which tend to sound warm and full. There's also a compression characteristic where the sound gets smoother, the feel for the player gets a bit softer as well, and the notes sustain longer. It's not just a tone thing, but also a touch and feel thing for many players. With a transistor, clipping or distortion comes on more immediately, and the emphasis is on odd-order harmonics, which can have a harsher, more metallic sound. There's less of the compression effect as well, and of course you don't get that extra coloration from the transformer, which tends to be nonlinear as well, saturating more as you crank things up, and tending to roll off some of the top end for a warmer tone. However, and this is important, manufacturers have made huge strides with pure solid-state designs. Modern solid-state amps, and I'm not talking about modeling here, but pure solid-state amplifiers sound much more tube-like, for lack of a better way to say it, and the feel is much more tube-like as well. When you do factor in modeling, the emulations can be stunningly realistic. So let's talk about the pluses and minuses of tubes versus solid-state. First, we have the desirable tonal qualities of the tubes: richness, dynamic response, sustain, harmonic content, gentle clipping characteristics, and so on. These have made tubes the go-to for players for decades. We also have the desirable characteristics of the transformers that tubes require: gentle saturation, warm top end, and full bottom end. On the other side of this, tubes and transformers are simply heavy and bulky. There's just no way around it. Tubes are also basically glass bottles with all the air inside removed. This makes them fragile and subject to breakage during transport. Tubes also wear out and their tone changes as they're used over weeks and months. They generally need to be replaced regularly if you're playing a lot, especially if you're pushing the amp hard. And to sound their best, many players find that tubes generally need to be cranked up, which can cause problems if the resulting volume is too loud for the situation. Solid state, on the other hand, does not require heavy transformers, and the components themselves are light and compact, meaning solid state amps generally can be made much lighter and can be made smaller as well. Transistors don't wear out or age and never need to be replaced. They're by definition solid devices, so they're durable and they don't break. Tonally, solid-state amps have made huge strides forward. They now sound and feel very tube-like. And if you do factor in the addition of modeling, convolution, profiling, and other technologies, then the emulation of tubes can be phenomenally accurate. But there are some other considerations. All other things being equal, tube amps tend to sound louder than solid-state amps. So for example, it's likely that a 50-watt solid-state amp is not going to be perceived as loud as a 50-watt tube amp. This is one of the reasons you often see much higher power ratings on solid-state amps. However, the tone of a solid-state amp doesn't change as you change the volume level. It just gets louder or softer. A tube amp, on the other hand, typically does change tone and feel as you change the volume level, and in most cases, a solid-state amp will simply be less expensive than a comparable tube amp. Another consideration is musical genre. Certain genres rely more heavily on tube characteristics. Roots rock, alt rock, and genres where semi-distorted guitar are common may work better with an appropriate tube amp. However, for clean jazz tones, solid-state is often preferable for its more consistent tone at different volumes and its clean amplification characteristics. But speaking of clean tones, either a tube or solid-state amp should be capable of clear, sparkling cleans, and either can serve very well as a pedal platform. High gain may also go either way. A player may enjoy the slightly softer touch of a high-gain tube amp, or may prefer the tighter, faster response of a high-gain solid-state amp. As a side note, you may see some tube amplifiers that have a tube rectifier, and some with a solid-state rectifier, and some where you can switch between different rectifier types. The rectifier, whether tube or solid-state, is part of the power supply in the amp, and that's the section of the amp that converts what's coming out of the wall outlet into usable voltage for the amp components. A solid-state rectifier will give a tube amp faster response and may be more desirable for high-gain tones, while a tube rectifier will generally have a softer, some say spongier feel that works well for lower-gain tones and certain styles of music. So as you can see, so much of this comes down to personal preference. What tone do you desire? What sort of touch or feel do you want the amp to have as a player? What volume are you playing at? What's your comfort level with fragile tubes and replacing tubes as needed? How much does the weight of the amp factor in for you? All these are important characteristics. Tubes versus solid state is a very complex topic, one that goes way beyond what we see at the surface. Those major secondary differences like weight, durability, and price are fairly objective and easy to vet. They either matter to you or they don't. But the primary considerations, tone and feel, are much more subjective and personal. Only you can make the call on those. Choosing the best amp for your needs can require soul-searching and serious consideration, but it's also a lot of fun as well. A great resource will be your Sweetwater sales engineer. Your sales engineer has experienced a lot of amplifiers of all types and can help you work through the many options on the market. Give them a call, and they'll be happy to discuss all the possibilities with you. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.
Oh, and for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, if you do right now, they've got a giveaway on all-inclusive vinyl listening package. So easy way to enter.
Yep. Get it done. Get it in there.
Unfortunately, I'm already subscribed.
Yeah. Well, that's fortunate though. So that way we get all the info when it comes in, because always good stuff there.
Now, I gotta say, like, he almost shied me towards, like, I might rather prefer the tube when you start talking about things like the sustain and the difference in clipping approach. That's the kind of thing that would appeal to me. Like, I'm a sustain whore, so like if there's a significant difference there, I might shy more towards the tube.
I don't remember which keyboard it was, but my friend's brother-in-law was a keyboard player, and he had a keyboard that had a tube in it, and like the tube was like prominently, as you're playing, it's like right, to the left of where you're playing, and it's up in the top, so you can like see it as you're playing. It's like the one of the big factors of the keyboard itself is the fact that it's got a tube
Well,
in there.
and the
So
old school synths, like you go back to the really old ones, and yeah, they did.
yeah, this one was more of, I think, it was like a newer high end, whatever, not recently, but this would have been 10 or 15 years ago or whatever, but probably not old school synth,
Well,
but like more of probably trying to emulate something like
and
that.
you've seen like some of the like retro synths coming back into the fold. Like there's a lot of keyboardists that are trying to get the old school organ and sounds that like you might have got with tubes, but trying to Nord is a good example of like one of the
Yeah,
companies that has really brought back some of that classic sound.
Yep, I do see the Nord stage pianos around. Sure.
That's one of the most popular, especially if you are like playing out and stage musician. They're hugely popular these days.
Indeed. And it used to be, you'd see the people who are, passionately this type of a keyboardist or that type of a keyboardist, and they had whichever one they would have. But of course, a lot of people, they'll bring a couple of different layers. So, I use this one for this and I use that one for that. And, they'll get everything all set up.
And
usually probably 2 or 3
that
layers.
was a nice explanation of like, the pluses and minuses on both sides. I probably still shy towards the solid state, but at the same time, if like these hybrids are interesting considerations. And, he did mention like, over on the solid state side where like if you're using IRs and some of the modelers, your versatility of like sounding like one of those tube oranges and getting the feel of the tube with the convenience of the solid state has gotten so much better that I think that's why you see the majority of the market shifting that way.
Well, the other thing is just even understanding the differences, the way that they were kind of laid out there, kind of helps inform when you actually go, like the next time you go to a music store, you're going to go plug in an actual guitar to actual amps, right? You can actually go in there and see, oh, here's a solid state one, here's a tube one, and you can actually get a good feel of what the differences are for your playing style. And that's another thing when you're choosing your own amp, as much research as you're going to do, you really got to do it. Like take your guitar or a guitar like your guitar and play it through the amp that you wanted to, check out. Or if you're checking out this one and that one and this one, but also knowing what style of music you want to play. Don't just go there and hit the doom, doom, doom. Okay, yeah, it sounds good. You got to go in there knowing you want to play something. So have something prepared that, maybe goes through a bunch of different styles that covers your range of what you normally would do, and do a piece of this song and a piece of that song and a piece of that song and see how it goes through this amp versus that amp, and get that interaction between you and the amp to make sure you can get yourself, you get the right amp for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, he did make sure to point that out, that it is about getting the feel. You got to feel it out and see what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, one of the stark differences, or one of the things that made that really click for me, was when I had the Line 6 floor pod that has all the different, it's got all, tons of presets in there. You can just, from this one that's like super clean and quiet, and then this one has a ton of echo on it, or this one is, a screaming loud metal sound, whatever. Like there were such differences, and it would each each sound would inspire something immediately. Like when I would start, as soon as I would click into a different sound, whatever would come out of my fingers would be different because of the interaction with that sound. And that really clicked home going through
And
sound.
one thing you'll notice more when you are dealing with like the line sixes, and it's something where you can go through presets, you'll notice significant like level changes, and you can flip from one preset where everything's whisper quiet, no line noise, to another preset, and all of a sudden it sounds like you're like at 10.
Exactly. And that's one that I would use for example, I would use that one that sounds like you're at 10 for tapping. Like if I wanted to just be able to not pick anything at all, but just work on like speed fretting, and you'd be like doodle 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 doodle, like doing that kind of a thing. I would try that with one of those kinds of presets. Whereas a super clean preset, if I were to do that, I wouldn't be able to hear the notes very clearly. But with something that's pushing that hard, you can, just by, you breathe on the strings and they're going to respond. So that's where you get that big difference in the interaction.
That's why it's nice to have like either good volume control or a good expression pedal, so that like if you are switching like that and the preset you're about to switch to is a really hot one, you can compensate like at the pedal level and pull it back so that it's not gonna kill them when you hit the note.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that he was also talking about, a difference between solid state and tubes, how hard you're pushing the signal. And in a case like that, if you wanted to go from this part of a song to that part of a song, and you want to go from a loud signal to a very quiet signal, that's going to be drastically, affected differently with tubes.
Well, like he said, on the tube side, like volume changes have more of an effect with the tube side, whereas on the solid state side, changing the volume doesn't necessarily like change the tone as much.
Yeah, like a 20% drop in volume is just a 20% drop in volume going from 70 to 50, whereas with the tubes, a 20% drop in volume might also drastically alter the tone, in addition to feeling like it even took more than 20%.
And again, it goes back to the style of music you're playing, because he like did mention like the jazz convenience. If you're a jazz player, you might prefer the solid states for their consistency.
Yep, and tying into some of the other videos from before, string gauge and pick type, and all of those things also factor in. So the more that you look at all of these factors and which things, and experimenting is really what it comes down to, is seeing what you like. Like I have in front of me here probably 7 different types of picks, including fat ones. I have one here that looks like it's actually made of felt. Like this pick right here is made of felt, and it's like super fat.
Looks like a rock.
It looks like a rock, but it's like it's not that stiff. It's like the more flexible than most picks would be, but made out of felt. And then big ones like those fat ones. We've also got down to like paper thin, probably half mil, like ones that are 0.5. I mean, it's just a question of those will change when you're actually using a pick, but I almost never play with a pick. So that's the other thing. It's like I'm usually playing with my fingers, so it's kind of irrelevant, but I wanted to be able to try all the different picks to see what felt right for different situations.
And you would get a different tone. A pick player gets a different kind of tone than a finger player. And that's Definitely. Part of the reason why you would want to be able to do both styles, because Geddy Lee did not just do one style, because you can hear it in their songs.
Yep. Exactly. And a lot of times it comes to simplifying things down, like using, Geddy Lee playing a 4-string, for example, is, stripping down bass to, hey, here's a 4-string, go. It doesn't need to be a 5-string. It doesn't need to be a 13-string. Some people go a little crazy with what they, have, but you can put out that whole wall of sound that they did for Rush, with just a 4-string.
And 3 guys.
And 3 guys. Yeah, I've seen them do it at the Garden, and it's impressive for sure.
So as always, great advice coming from Sweetwater. They do not steer you wrong, and they're not pushy, which is what I like about like the advice there is for you to chew on and make your own decisions. They don't try to just sell you whatever the hell they want to sell you. It's important in the music equipment world not to get steered in the wrong direction. That's how you lose customers. That's probably why they've been so successful.
Yep. Yep, they have a good sympathetic ear for what you're trying to do and what you're looking to do, and they have the experience is the main thing. The depth of experience to be able to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
Always good stuff.
You will get sales reps who actually understand what you're talking about, which huge plus for me.
Indeed.
So, like he did mention, IRs and, amp modelers. And our next video is going to go down that rabbit hole. And this is a musician who has the amps, as you can see. Like those, I would take any one of those and be happy with just that. But he's looking for a way to get their tones and sounds and utilize them now in production work without having to go back and re-record tracks and plug into different amps to get different signals. When you do start to use plugins and amp modelers, IRs, you get that benefit of you're starting with that clean signal and then you're changing the tone post, and you can try out different amps and see which one sounds the best in the mix. And there's a convenience to that.
Yeah, and like we've talked about in the past, like that's where the importance of the clean input signal is, for not having to try to remove stuff out of a wet track. You're taking a dry track, or you're taking a track that is clean, and then you're able to do whatever you need to after.
And the importance of learning how to be able to play clean. You don't want to be that guitarist who can't play the part unless they hear the distortion. Like you want to get comfortable playing the part regardless of what you're hearing while you do it, so that way you can adjust the tone post afterwards. If you get a good clean signal, these solutions work great to change the tone to where you need to. So it's worth getting comfortable with your playing so that you don't depend on the tone to be able to play. Same goes with singers. A singer who has to hear themselves with all the effect and can't actually do their part without it suffers and does not always, to me, does not give the sometimes the best track there. I mean, it might help them to get the energy, but it does not make for a better recording.
Right. Hearing what, to me, the monitors should be the brutal, honest truth. Like it should be your voice with no mess. You just want to be able to hear it clearly so that you can already hear what's going on with everybody else. You're getting some of everybody else in your mix, but you also want to hear enough of your voice that you can be able to hear it clearly, that if you are a little bit off, you want to be able to correct that, rather than if you're a little bit off, having so much effect on it that it's fixing it for you, but now you don't realize you're off, so now you get further off, and that's just not helping anybody.
And you want to be aware of the tone that you're sending in, because the golden rule is garbage in, garbage out. So if you hear flaws in your clean like voice or your clean guitar tone, and that's what's getting recorded in, those flaws are still going to be there when you turn. Matter of fact, you're going to hear more when you start to turn on the effects and everything. So
depending on how much, like certain things can be buried in the effects, like with vocal things, a little bit of delay, for example, can help
or
by,
compression. If they're using
yep.
compression as they're like monitoring, then they might not hear something that they should hear.
Yep. But he's got a nice wall of equipment there for sure.
Yeah, and this is another freshie. I mean, tonight was like 50% more freshies. I love it. Indeed. I love it when we, manage to get some new channels into the topics. The ones that return tend to be the like our final one. These are the channels that are consistent with like so many topics, but it's nice to find some of these other channels as we explore these things. And this is another one that at Lonely Rocker over on YouTube, like glad I found this channel. When it comes to the Gear Horrors nights, we will be checking out some of these.
Indeed.
And he's at Lonely Rocker over on YouTube. Guitars, gear, and recording. It's advertising to us.
And looking at the amp models.
And he's looking at something that I think a lot of guitarists these days are swimming around with, the notion that like maybe it's time to not necessarily retire some of my gear, but just to shift how you're getting that tone. Whether these amps, I'd be taking them out on the stage, but in the studio, he's going to show us, some alternate ways to get the same tones.
Yep.
And we're at that time in technology where it's a worthy consideration now. 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have felt so strong that like I can get the same tone over here that I get over here. But with IRs and everything in the last decade, things have really improved.
Indeed. And that's the point, is when it gets to that tipping point where, is it worthwhile to drop the physical hardware? I mean, he's already got the physical hardware, like you said, so trying to replace it is a big jump. Whereas somebody who doesn't have anything and they're choosing which way to go, with the physical hardware or the amp modeler, I mean, it's, as the technology improves, people lean to the, the modeler side, but we shall see what his results
I'm feeling like, he's going to meet in the middle, but if he does someday throw all his stuff out, I wish I was his neighbor. I'd be garbage.
Driving by like, what?
I'd be garbage picking that house. So
that's a big pile.
Let's see if he chose the best guitar amp modeler for 2024. It's nice, fresh information.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, listen, I have some very unfortunate news. Look, it's not you, it's me. No, it's not me. There's somebody else. And it's rendered you guys useless. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Listen, I've enjoyed every second of our time together, but people change. We move on. I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you for your years of service, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the next chapter of your lives. Go on, be strong, and rock on. Goodbye, you excessively loud, heavy heathens.
4 to 6 weeks later.
Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. So the first question that really needs to be answered is, what am I going to do with this empty wall now? Just kidding. Now, you didn't think I'd be getting rid of my amps now, did you? Now, the whole purpose of getting an amp modeler now is I wanted a professional grade tool that would offer a lot of I/O, so I have great sounding amp models in addition to some good I/O to help me reamp and do blends and introduce other gear through the modeler. Amps are going to be a big part of that experience and topics that I'm going to cover going forward. But I did make a decision. I do have my first amp modeler here, and I'm talking professional grade. And I want to thank you guys. I put out that video asking which one you thought I should get in 2023, 2024. Got a ton of feedback on that, and I really, really appreciate that. So I want to share some stats from that video, let you know what you guys chose, and then ultimately I'm going to reveal the one hiding underneath that Lonely Rocker t-shirt there, and then we'll get into some details of what I plan to do with it, how I plan to set it up and use it, and potentially the type of content I want to offer here on the channel around that device over there. And by the way, I'm going to put an asterisk beside this choice because I want to get deeper into different modeling technology, so it's very likely we're going to see other devices here on the channel. I'm actually currently working on something, hoping that's going to come to fruition soon. I will announce that if and when it does. Anyways, let's check out the stats and then I'll reveal my new modeler. So in my last video, I had suggested that I want to buy a modeler, and I created a short list. I narrowed it down to about 5 or 6 devices, but some of you went off the grid, which was kind of interesting. So what I've done here for the initial results is I've grouped everything by brand, just to get a sense of which brand was the most popular, at least over the course of the days that I presented this video. So number one, by quite a wide margin, is Fractal at 29.8%. A lot of Acoustic 3s, FM9s, but 30% of you almost suggested that I get a Fractal product. Number two, kind of a distant second at 16% is Line 6. The lion's share of that was likely the Helix, though there are some Helix LTs and some HX Stomp fans. So 16% of you suggested that I get a Line 6 product. Now in third place, we have an other category here, and I'm going to talk about that in a second because that's a bunch of different things, but a couple of interesting things came up in there. So tied for third place, or I guess technically tied for fourth place, we're looking at Neural, DSP, and Kemper at 8.5%. And then we've got a Fender at 7.4%. And then Boss as a right-in category, actually 6.4% of you suggested that I get a Boss product. Now I have featured the GX100 on the channel. The GT1000 is an interesting unit. I didn't include those in my short list because I didn't feel they had enough I/O. I wanted something a little bit more, but those are definitely great devices. And a number of you thought they were worthy of being here in my studio. So I found that really, really interesting. So the other categories comprise of a bunch of onesies and twosies, various amp modelers, some of which I had heard of before, a couple that I hadn't. But one really interesting suggestion was to forego a modeler altogether and just get a really good audio interface with a lot of I/O and then just use the ToneX and Amplitude software. Now that's a really interesting suggestion because considering I want a lot of I/O, and I think ToneX has some of the best tone models or amp models on the market, especially for the price. Now the pedal itself doesn't have a lot of I/O, so that's not going to suffice on its own, but there is the software version and it's the same thing. So it was definitely something worth chewing on. All right, let's take a look at the results based on my short list. I have 6 devices on my list, and the number one device that you guys recommend that I get is the Fractal Axe FX3 at 27.8%. By the way, some of you voted for multiple devices or gave me a couple suggestions. That all counted as a vote. In second place is the Line 6 Helix at 18.5%. In third place, we have a tie between the Quad Cortex and the Kemper. A lot of you didn't specify which Kemper, either the floor or the rack model, so I just included it all as one, but they were tied for third place. In fourth place, at 13%, is the Fender Tone Master Pro. And closing out the list in last place at 11.1% is the Fractal FM9. Now, for me, it wasn't just about tones, it was the device itself. And a lot of you obviously heard me, and it's probably the reason why that you recommended that I get the Axe FX3. It has the most I/O, tons of amplifiers. It's a pretty up-to-date device. With Line 6, some of you sort of expressed a reservation that Helix has been out for a while, and some of you feeling that there's a new device coming out at some point sooner than later. I know they just released a new firmware. That's been my feeling as well. But very interesting that the Fractal Axe FX3 is the number one suggestion that you guys think that I should get. Well, which one did I actually get? So enough talking. Let's take a look. So dramatic. Yes, I decided to get a Fractal FM9. That was actually last on the list. So why did I get an FM9? Well, let's take a listen to some quick tones and I can explain to you why I chose the FM9. So why did I get an FM9 over a Fractal Axe FX3? Well, to me, purchases come down to what I need. Now, certainly the Fractal Axifex 3 offers the most. But for me, and what I really needed in my studio was a combination of good tones, great effects, and good I/O, which the FM9 does. Now, there are some limitations on the FM9 in comparison to the Axifex 3, but some of those limitations are really only applicable, I think, if you're playing live, because I'm recording here. I don't like to build big presets. Not that I wouldn't do it if I had that functionality, but it's not what I want to do. I want to create patches, probably single, maybe double an amp here and there, but generally it's based on one amp. I might stretch out a little bit now that I have the functionality here, because there's actually no shortage of what you can do here, just a bit less than what you do in the Axifex 3. But it created a little bit of a limitation, which is kind of a forced limitation. I can't really go too crazy technically, because you can kind of go pretty crazy on the FM9. I mean, it's just, was it like 300 amps and tons of effects? And this is the turbo model, so you have a little bit more DSP. But that doesn't limit how much I can stack, because I can create multiple presets, record, multi-track, which I do anyways, and I can still achieve the same thing, and just a bit more of a custom workflow for me. In terms of I/O, it has plenty of I/O for what is a smaller device. You've got 3 pairs of ins and outs here, so obviously I'm taking 2 that goes out into my speaker monitors, because actually I am using this as my audio interface right now, and there's a couple small things that are bugging me, which I will dive into deeper probably in another video, but it's been pretty great USB interface. I've been looking to get a new interface, and this actually killed 2 birds with 1 stone. So, but then you got an additional 2 pairs of ins and outs. So for example, when I'm reamping, I've got my load box and the output into the amp here, so I can actually reamp through another pair of ins and outs. And then there's another one here. We talked about Tonex. I've actually got my Tonex pedal sitting down here, which I can bring in into a loop, into a signal chain or preset in the FM9 edit. So suddenly all of the amps that are in Tonex, it's like another block now. I can add amps from here as well. So Tonex can be very much part of this solution. So I just felt it had enough. And also, it fits perfectly on my desk. I measured everything out, with my controllers here, and it fits perfectly. And I like actually having the foot switches here. They become hand switches. So if I set up different scenes for my different presets, I can access them here. Tap tempo if I want to do a tap tempo before a take or something like that. It's just handy to have all of these buttons here. If it was a rack, I probably would have it down here. I wouldn't have the foot switch. I may have to add the foot switch. It's a significant extra cost to get the foot switch. So it just seemed like an all-in-one package that gave me enough power, gave me enough amps and effects that I need. And so far, I've actually had it for a few weeks, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's giving me everything that I need in terms of functionality, and ultimately, the form factor just seemed to work best here for my studio. Now, if I outgrow it in the future, of course, I can sell it and I can upgrade to an Axifex 3, but so far, it's proving to be the right device. Okay, there's one last thing that might be driving some of you crazy. Now it's officially mine. Well, there's my intro to the Fractal FM9. I'm super excited to have it here in my studio. I've been having a lot of fun with it and learning it pretty quickly. It's not as confusing as people say it is. You just need to kind of get your hands dirty and figure out where everything is, and then just once you figure that out, it becomes a lot easier. Anyways, lots to learn about the FM9. I want to share everything possible about this device. Do let me know any topics that you would like to see me cover here on the channel. I want to lean more to the recording side of the device, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about dialing in tones, different signal chains, all sorts of things, presets, things like that. It's all open, fair game here, and I would love to hear from you, so let me know in the comments. I'm populating my list as we speak. Now, you may be in the market for a modeler yourself, but maybe the FM9 is a little bit out of your budget. Well, not to worry, there's a bunch of great budget modelers out there. In fact, I covered one not so long ago. I'm going to put it here for you to check out, the Sonic Cake Matribox 2. That's a great entry-level modeler. Check that one out. Let me know what you think about it. If you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I'll catch you in the next one.
Oh, it's always official the moment you pull off that plastic.
Oh yeah, I've seen people who've had a had a pedal for years. It's got the plastic on it. If you reached over to go peel the plastic, they'd be like, "No." It's like, to them, that's an extra layer of protection. Like, oh, if water spills on it, it's not going to get in because it's still got that on there. It's like, no, dude. It's you see how it's like half peeled up? No, it's been ineffective for that reason for a long time. You should have peeled that off immediately.
Oh, I always make the mistake of like getting just like a corner, and once you start to, then it gets annoying, and you just
you don't want to. You don't want to leave that little flag there. No.
It's like ripping a Band-Aid
Definitely.
off.
Mhm. Exactly. But that is, make it official, make it all yours, and get into all the details. Like, experiment with it. Try this, try that. Even if it sounds you're not going to try to use, or you have no plans on using, check them out anyway, because, maybe it'll inspire you to try something different.
Now, I'm
You
surprised
never know.
he went with the FX9, although after he explained it, because was it the 3? That's the one that I was saying looks sexy. Like,
The Axe 3, the rack
yeah,
mount. Yeah, yeah.
and I guess if I was just going by looks, like I like the big buttons and the color, but this did look to be more suited to what he was looking for. Like his emphasis on input outputs and what he was looking to do with it seemed to fit much better.
And again, right answer for him doesn't mean it's the right one for everybody, but again,
Well,
you gotta find what's going to answer your needs for what you're
he
doing.
did what every good guitarist should do. He did his homework. He reached out to. He's got an audience. He reached out to them, asked for suggestions, and then went and did more research until he found what he was looking for. It's better to take a little time before you buy your gear than to just run out and unless you're okay with the return. If there's a good return policy and they give you like some time to test it out, you don't want to just buy willy-nilly. You want to know what you're getting.
Exactly. And that's where it helps to have people checking the stuff out for us.
Especially for stuff like
letting us know.
this. I mean, you look at his amps. Like this is a man who has been devoted to like guitar tone. You don't acquire that many amps unless you are. So like what he was looking for here was something to take all of that love that he's given there into, 21st century guitar technology.
Yep. And also with a collection like that, you would figure like if you're looking at, let's say, 8 amps across that wall right there, when he had 6 of those 8 amps, there was a reason that he got those last 2, right? It wasn't like, oh, it's just the newest model or whatever. There was something specific that he was trying to do that those other 6 weren't going to get.
I guarantee you he was looking for like a specific tone that you can only get like a 5150, the kind of tone you're going to get from it, and you don't find that in any old amp.
Yep.
It's like those,
just like you see Marsha back there.
Yeah, it's like those oranges. Like, they're so popular because their tones are so popular. And
yep, he's got some heavy hitters there for sure.
I liked his mentality, his approach to getting it, feeling it out. Plus, like he said, he killed 2 birds with one stone, getting an audio interface along with the amp modeling and being able to, like, he can take these and reamp them, and I'm sure that probably supports IRs, so he could build an IR that simulates any one of those, and now he's got it over in the box.
Indeed. Good stuff.
Yeah, there's a
Lonely rocker.
There's a real convenience to taking this kind of solution approach if you're a guitarist. It doesn't hurt to have those good amps for like stage play, but to go towards these solutions in the future when you're in the studio, and he's built himself a pretty damn nice studio there, this is a solution that fits well in that environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad we found this channel too. At Lonely Rocker.
And then back to an old favorite.
Well, and now we're going to get into just like, sculpting your tone and going from a really crappy tone to a really amazing one. And we couldn't ask for a better source for advice on this. The sensei never steers us wrong with his advice.
Indeed. And I like the whole premise of the video, going from a crappy tone to a good tone, so you know what you're listening for, adjusting each individual setting on the amp or what have you, and just focusing in on what that difference makes.
Yeah, and a lot of times you might be starting with a crappy tone, so like it's the bottom up approach. Once in a while, you might actually have a great tone, and you go fidget with it and turn it into a crappy tone. So it's good to be able to recognize, like, where the tone goes wrong or right.
And what's good about it and how to make it better and all that. Yeah.
Yep. So at Samurai Guitarist, this is going to be our last video. One of my favorite channels, of last year. One of the best channels we found. Constantly going back. He's got a series on weird guitars, and like I'm just like constantly going to check out like all these different pieces of equipment that he explores. His songwriting advice, fantastic. Subscribe to this channel. It is worth it if you're a musician.
One of the ones that I found for another night that we're going to talk about tone is one on a little device that allows you to bend on certain strings or adjust the tuning on certain strings with little levers. Just on an existing guitar that you have with a minimal amount of modification. You got to modify the guitar in order to use it, but it'd be something to check out.
And without
for certain styles,
without blowing out the tuning.
Yep, that's the idea, is be able to to do it without blowing out the tuning, and there's certain ways that it affects that, or that it makes that happen. But we'll check it out the next time. In this case, it's about the actual differences in the amp, mostly, probably, right? And then
awful tone to good tone.
To look at the guitars themselves, the electric and the acoustics.
Oh, I'd love to see his advice on the acoustic side too. I'll have to go see if he's got something on that. So here we go, the Sensei.
Yes, indeed.
Everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to come up with the absolute worst guitar tone that I possibly can. I will then tweak one element at a time, slowly changing that awful tone into an amazing tone. Now let me just put this out there in advance. If you end up disliking my amazing tone, here's what I have to say to you, pal. That's totally fair. Tone is subjective. I'm just trying to do my best to come up with something that I like. If you don't like it, I can respect that. Before we get into it though, why don't we do a flash sale over my course platform? The first 50 of you to use promo code BADTONE will get 50% off any individual course of your choice over at SamuraiGuitarTheory.com. Over there, I have 4 courses. You can learn music theory from the ground up with my courses, The Rudiments and Beyond the Basics. I have a course that outlines pentatonics, and my newest one, The Craft of Soloing, looks at the bigger musical elements of soloing, the type of stuff that takes you from simply playing notes to making music. Every course is a one-time purchase, giving you lifetime access. Use promo code BADTONE to get 50% off any individual course of your choice. There's only 50 of those promo codes available. They'll probably run out in a day or two, so get them while the getting's good. You can find more information over at SamuraiGuitarTheory.com. I'll also put up links in the description. Okay, to kick things off, I'm going to come up with the absolute worst tone that I can, and for that, I'm going to use the good old trusty Squier Stratocaster. This is the guitar that I started on when I was 13. I had a blue one of these, and I would mangle pop punk cover songs as I lamented the struggle of a teenager growing up in upper middle class suburbia. Good times back in the 90s. So many of us plunked out our first songs on one of these. It's an entry-level guitar with an entry-level price and an entry-level sound. And to make matters worse, I suspect that the strings haven't been changed in, 20 years. For this, I'm going to plug it directly into my audio interface, giving us that awful DI guitar sound. Here's what that sounds like. All right, that was really quite hurting. We got to get a real amp involved here. Everybody starts on some small little solid state thing, like this one. I started out with a Squier amp. This is pretty close. It's not going to sound great, but it should be a fair bit better than that DI sound. Here we go. I mean, that was better, but it was still quite bad. It's time to step up the game in a big way and use a real amp. The amp that I'm going to be using is this guy here. It has no serial number, it has no model number, it has no brand name, and it was built by my dad. It's the perfect amp for the sounds that I gravitate towards. It's got a single 12-inch speaker, it's got a beautiful clean channel, it takes pedals well. Here is what a cheap guitar sounds like going through it. So that is a world of difference, probably the biggest jump that we're gonna see. But for this next step, I've swapped out the Squire for my Fender Rarity Strat. This isn't some vintage custom shop thing or anything like that, but it's professional grade, it's high quality. Here's what this guitar sounds like through that amp. We're getting somewhere here. This is the tone that I can get behind. Next up, let's add some compressor. I almost always have this pedal turned on. In a nutshell, it turns up your guitar when you're quiet and it turns it down when you're loud, essentially compressing your signal. For lack of a better term, to me it sounds like you're taming your guitar signal. Here's what it sounds like. As far as clean sounds go, I'd say that's pretty all right, but let's add some distortion to the mix because that's always a good time. For that, I'm going to be running the Mythos Golden Fleece into the Thorpe Gunshot. This is what I call the Chris Buck sound because I heard him use these two pedals in a video the other day, and I decided then and there that I just simply couldn't live my life unless I also own them, so I impulse bought them. Influencer marketing got the better of me that time, and I'm okay with that. Here's what it sounds like. Next, I'm going to add the atmospheric effects, reverb, and delay. This makes your guitar sound like it's in an open space, giving it some depth, which for whatever reason, the ear likes to hear. For delay, I'm using the Demodash T120. And by the way, if you're interested in any of these pedals, I'll put up links to them in the description. And for my reverb, I'm using this spring reverb unit. That was also a Samurai Dad special. It's just a spring reverb unit that sounds pretty good with actual springs in it. I don't go too heavy on these effects at this point. It's more just a small sprinkling of spice. I'm gonna be adding some more atmosphere in the next stage, but let's see what this sounds like. So at this point, that's as good of a sound as I'm getting out of my amp. Oh, and I should also mention the microphone that I have on that amp is a Sennheiser 421. But next, we're gonna need to move into the digital realm. Now, I should give you a disclaimer. I am by no means a mixing engineer. This is not my specialty, but I'm gonna show you what I do to get my guitar sounding good enough to me. As you can see, I use Pro Tools, and this waveform that we're looking at here is the last recording of the guitar that I did. The first thing that I'll do in Pro Tools is create an aux reverb track, and I'll send a portion of my guitar over to the stereo reverb track where I have the Valhalla Vintage Reverb plugin set up. The fact that this track is in stereo brings the reverb to life. It's slightly different in both ears, so it sounds that much bigger. I can do something similar with delay, but in this plugin, I change it so that the delay on the right side is timed slightly different than the delay on the left, so you can really feel the stereo space. I'll play it back for you right now. I'll start with the dry signal, then add the reverb, and then the delay. Take a listen. And the last thing I'll do is add some digital EQing and compression to my guitar file. My method here is kind of a mixing faux pas, but it's what I do. It works for me. I will just add the Neutron 3 plugin, select a preset, and maybe tweak it a little bit. Ideally, you would manually do all of this and wouldn't use presets, but I'm a busy guy who doesn't really enjoy mixing all that much, and the majority of you people are watching my videos on your phones. So if you're me, you gotta use your time wisely. Here's what this sounds like. I'll start it without this plugin turned on and then turn it on halfway through. Take a listen. That's as good of a tone as I'm gonna get. I've come a long way in a number of gradual steps. So what I'm gonna do now is play you a solo, and I'm gonna start out with my horrible sound, and then every 2 bars I will alter my tone, taking the same steps that I took throughout this video, so that you can hear each stage one after another. Take a listen as I go from a bad sound to a good sound. Here are a couple thoughts on this. Apart from the drastic changes like turning on the overdrive or switching amps, everything was fairly subtle, but it did add up over time. Was it the greatest guitar sound ever recorded? I'm not certain about that. One thing I am certain on is that it sounds a lot better than what I started with. But here's the thing, it's all very much subjective. I'm sure there'll be somebody in the comments who says that the Squire paired with the Trainer was their favorite sound, and there'll be other people who really enjoyed the final product. I mean, whatever you like is whatever you like. Live your life as you see fit. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Bad tone to good tone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, if you use promo code BADTONE over at my course platform, samuraiguitartheory.com, you can get 50% off any individual course of your choice. There are only 50 of those available. They will run out. Get them while the getting's good. Thank you all for watching. If you want to check out another video like this one, hit that link up there. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell to stay tuned for a wide range of musical content. Until next time, be good to each other, be good to yourselves, be good to the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.
Nice. He went from Jerry Garcia to Jimi Hendrix.
Always a pleasure.
And I like that he showed it with, like, the Squire like that, something like it's an entry level kind of guitar that a lot of guitars start with.
Absolutely. Yep. The Epiphone that I started with was a Strat copy. So, it looked like a Strat. It's an Epiphone. It was cheap when I got it, 30 some years ago. And, that was the one I sanded down to nothing, took it all apart, knew nothing about, guitars, but just, had at it and, painted it metallic flake blue at one point. I'll bring it up sometime. I have it over at Joey's house. But I'll bring it over here sometime.
It's funny that he mentioned like the strings, probably like 20 plus years old. I got a couple of them like that too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that Epiphone that's over Joey's, the strings are probably 3 years old at this point. I do remember changing them, because they had been on there for a long time. So I did change them out just so that they weren't that old. But I think probably the oldest strings I have around are probably on the Dean. That's probably been sitting away the longest.
No, the Dean.
That's one where I was gonna put 12s on it. I think it's got 10s on it now, but I was gonna switch to 12s.
Oh, before you do, let's do a 10 test and then do a 12 test. We'll learn from the testing we saw tonight.
Well, what we might end up doing though is we might do the 12s on the telly instead, and see what kind of difference that makes. But then again, I can get more than one set of 12s. It's allowed. They allow that. But I only have one set in the house.
Well, for those of you looking for cool guitar tricks, tips, and knowledge at Samurai Guitars, can't say enough good things about the channel.
Absolutely. And great examples there, great comparisons, as especially that one, lining them all up, changes one after the other like that. Very cool.
Yeah. Always enjoy watching him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a fun rabbit hole to go down. We'll have more.
Absolutely.
We'll have more tone nights in the future. We'll spread them out, and sound sculpting in 2024 going to be part of our theme.
Definitely.
Have to add that into the intro.
Sound sculpting and other things. Yeah. Make a whole list of everything. But some good resources, like you said, the things that are coming up in the feed now, getting us new pages that are helping us to find more good content that then additionally help to get even more. So, way to bring it all together. Love it.
Yeah, our YouTube algorithm is looking awesome. And for this one, again, special thanks to Uni. He kind of nudged me on this one, and I love the channel that he introduced us to. That's a tester after my own heart.
Yeah, definitely good system. Good systematic way to go about it in each of the tests that we've seen. The way to change one variable at a time, or to to show the reasons why we jump from this to that to get the real comparisons, because those are important. And understanding how to do those comparisons yourself, what to listen for if you're going to go into a guitar store and check out, this amp versus that amp versus that amp. Want to check those things out. Same thing with the guitars. This 6-string bass. Bring it down, and what are you going to do with it? Try it out with different tones, try different songs, different amps, see what everything's all about.
And get to know what you're listening for. Like we learned a little bit tonight about some of the sounds we should be listening for when we try out these different approaches.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was good. We'll be back tomorrow night. Thanks everyone for
checking
joining.
out some music tomorrow night.
Tomorrow, Angified presents DJ Tatius, Band Lab Plus Coffee at 9. And then at 10, we're going to be checking out some tracks, little news, reviews. Hey, right. Little Glenn.
What happened?
I shrunk.
I can fight my way out of here.
So we'll see you tomorrow night, everyone. Good night.
Have a good one.
We cover digital audio workstations and music tools. We explore theory, gear, and 82. How to write and compose, and the art of arranging. Taking a look at AI and how the times have changed. On a PC or a Mac, and even with a mobile device, we'll be talking about it all every Thursday night. From software to plugins and synths that entice. Dive deep into tech and let creativity take flight. Talkin IT. We're talking IT. Come and join in and have some fun. It's highly educational with a lot to learn. From bedroom producers to seasoned pros, we're breaking it down so knowledge grows. Whether you're a DJ or a beat-making wizard, we got the tips and tricks to make your sound sizzle. Mixing and mastering, that's our jam. With the tutorials and tips on how much rev. Get the best quality from your setup and gear. Tune in every week and lend us your ear. We're talking IT. Come and join in and have some fun. It's highly educational with a lot to learn. We're talking IT. We're talking IT. Every Thursday night on Angified.
I love you, oh loves. Do you have those? Do you